Happy Tuesday, everybody. Rodney Wilds in the house. What do you know, Rodney?
I'm actually in the house.
He, you're actually for reals in the house. You doing good today?
Doing awesome. Doing awesome. How about you?
I tell you, this weather, I am just loving this weather. Just man, oh man. For anybody that's not in Middle Tennessee, it has been blazing hot, and today the high is going to be 83 degrees. I can take it.
Yes, it's a lot better than the high 90s we've been in. It's been
Oh,
brutal.
brutal is it really has been brutal. And for anybody that happens to watch us after the fact, my name is Andy Elliott. I'm a realtor here in Williamson County with Rodney Wilds, a lender also in Williamson County. If you have questions for us, just give us a call. All the contact information in the description box. When we talk about hot summers, it does get hot in Middle Tennessee, but not for terribly long stretches. But like this last one was like a week where it was crazy hot. Isn't that about right? About a week?
Yeah, it was in the high 90s every time. It was awful.
But I'm just telling you, if you're not from here and you would find that unpleasant, which I do, it doesn't do that the whole summer. And the leaves on the trees here for me in my neighborhood are starting to change already. So we dip from summer to fall pretty quick around here. I like it.
Yeah, we have 1 week of spring and 1 week of fall.
It goes direct. That's really appealing. Thank you for sharing that. Did you have any golfing done? Did you get any golfing done this weekend?
I did. Actually, we golfed every day. I maybe golfed out for the first time in my life. It's we played 4 days in a row. It's been hot, so yeah, it's wore me out.
48 what? 48 what?
4 days in a row.
Oh God! Wow, no kidding.
Yeah.
Well, that'll do it.
I'm ready.
You got your steps in though, didn't you?
Yeah.
You got your steps in. So here we go. We're going to start talking about real estate a little bit, what's going on. And I got to tell you, before we get too deep into the next normal section that we do you have, well, wait. Here we go with the first thing that I love to talk about. And here it is. This guy knows how to make a slide. Let's do this with Pip. Pip. Dink. There it goes.
All right, here we are. This is a 3-month view of what mortgage-backed securities our rates look like. Green is good, red is bad. As you can see, the last several weeks, this is September 3rd here. We'll go back all the way to this is around August 1st right here. We've seen a pretty stable, slightly increasing rates for getting just a hair better over this period of time. I think it's going to continue to see this. The floor support right here, you can see that line helps us keep our rates there, and just waiting for that Fed news coming up later the month.
And do you have an opinion on if it's going to still be 0.25 or 50?
I think it's going to be 0.25. I don't think they've going to do anything drastic outside of that. I think they'll do more cuts this year, though, but I think the first one will be a 0.25.
Look who's here. Hi, Angie. Welcome. Welcome, young lady. Glad you're here. We were just talking about the nice weather. Sure, you got that out there. Ronnie, I have to say that, you know what, I'm reading rates. I use Mortgage News Daily, I think it is, or Mortgage Daily News, one of them. And it's telling me like 6.4, right now. Now, I know we always go through this every week. What I see on that app and what you offer to clients can be different based on case-by-case basis. It's generally lower. It's my understanding. You've been consistently lower. But I mean, isn't this 640 a big freaking deal? I mean, isn't that a big deal?
It's getting there. It's what it's normalizing the market. What I call normalizing, just more movers and things like that, and your occasional refinance right now. So yes, it is a big deal. It seemed like 7% was a really crazy number for the mortgage world, and kind of shut it down when it got to 7 and higher. So yeah, I think staying below the F64 is a very very big deal.
Is it? I'm going through a bit of a. Rodney, just bear with me just a second. We got news of an echo that we're fixing. I wonder if that takes care of it. We'll find out. Rodney is in stereo. Go on, Rodney. Tell us more. See if you still got an echo.
Well, that was about it. But if the rates stay where they're at, we're expecting the rates to continue to drop. So hopefully it'll become an even bigger deal.
Okay. All right. All right. So I got that fixed. I'm going to do something. Be careful. I'm sorry for the technical stuff, but
we always have technical stuff.
Well, there's a lot of buttons to push.
No, I mean, that's just part of the show. We have a couple news segments, rate segment, and a technical segment.
Because now I know you're perfect now. I know what the fix is. Perfect. Thanks for putting up with it, and thank you for Ange and Phil for letting us know. That's awesome. And kill that. All right. So the question on the table, and this is pretty basic. We're covering basic stuff. But the question is, when is the right time to buy a house? You ask these questions. That's what we want to go through, just in a basic sense. That we're going to go through trends. That's what we're going to do next. And I think that the reason this caught my attention was what we were just talking about, and that is that with the feds making those adjustments, so it's coming up, people are going to be waiting. Wouldn't you agree with that, Rodney?
Yes.
And so, I mean, this question would become even more salient. So let's talk about this, just kind of briefly, go through it pretty quick. But if you're watching this the first time and you have questions when this is done, because this isn't all encompassing, it's just sort of covering the basics. Well, many buyers have found themselves stuck in real estate in no man's land, and that's surely been the case for the last couple of years. Check an echo. What should I do with my money? Author Brian Cardona, whatever that is, explained how to know when it's time to buy a home. People need to be financially savvy, and that's the case these days. It's the people that are really prepared that are buying houses. Wouldn't you say? I mean, I don't mean to say it's ever been casual, but you show me the people that are pretty good with a spreadsheet and keep track of their finances. They're the ones that are buying homes these days. It has been for quite a while, right?
Yes, it's the buyers. Since the affordability issue, since prices went up, rates went up, it's definitely kind of pushed the buyer's envelope. It's made it harder to qualify. So yes, I mean you have to be better than you used to be just to buy today.
Yeah. And what he's talking about is he's outlined several key questions home buyers should ask themselves before committing to that long-term purchase. We've all seen in the news how quickly the prices of homes are rising across the country. Now, in general, that's slowed down a little bit, but over the last few years, it's been stupid fast. So we're also seeing how rent is also going up very rapidly, and it puts people in that position. What is the thing that we talk about first-time buyers? What is it that motivates first-time buyers? The most common reason it's going to be that rent goes up. I mean, they're just, and you have no control, or they got to get out of their parents' house. There's a lot. They say the percentage of people that are back with their parents is not at an all-time high, but it's really quite high percentage-wise. But rent is usually, it's a financial pressure thing for the rent. And so people are balancing that. Can I pay rent or can I buy a house? That's what it's coming down to. So buying a home is one of the biggest investments, if not the biggest financial decision you can make in your life. So it does deserve a lot of careful consideration. And I, for one, would say for anybody, and you back me up on this if you think it's proper, for anybody that's even thinking about buying a house, wouldn't it be smart to talk to a lender early and start to work on that stuff, Rodney?
Yeah, the credit. I thought the article was spot on. Credit. You got to check your credit, get pre-approved, and see what programs are available for you. Because there's no sense in a lot of cities people trying to save up for a huge down payment if you've got like companies like ours that can do the 0 downs and 3% downs and 5% downs. So you don't want somebody sitting there thinking they have to save up 20 or 30% to buy a house. So yes, you got to check your credit, make sure it's in good shape, get your pre-approval done, and explore those program options.
And I'm gonna tell anybody that's watching and they're wondering about having us talk about lenders, excuse me, call so early. Nobody's trying to sell you anything here. What lenders do in the beginning is to help make sure. A number of years ago, when I bought my house, one of the first things the LO loan officer said, and it was in Roddy's office, said that I had to do was pay down some debt. I had a little bit of debt, and that was one of the first things that I had to do. And now I was in the position to do it all at once. I could just pay it all off and call it done, But you might be in a position where you've got X amount of dollars on a card and take you a minute, to get that squared away. And that's why calling ahead and getting that done early, getting prepared for it is so important, especially because people are running so close. It's such a fine line between qualifying and not, seems like these days. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yep. So that, it's one of those days. Now, Dave Ramsey says, I'm going to have to get your opinions on this because I've lost the thread. That's all right. So Dave Ramsey he's a guy that actually lives here, and he's a kind of a financial guru. And he always talks about if you want to buy a house, you shouldn't, it shouldn't cost any more than 25% of your income. Do you agree with that, Rodney? Or is or is that too extreme?
It'd be nice. It'd be nice if everybody was like, that had finances in order. But sometimes, I think families are better off taking, getting something, if it's in the 30s and they can afford it and it gets them the house they need for the bedrooms or whatever. I think it's a personal decision. It's based on their finances and things like that. There's a lot of stuff that goes into those numbers too. The way we count it, a spouse or something have some side income that we're not counting, and it really is not a 30% number anyways, if that makes sense. Like if you used all of their income, it'd be in the 20s and things like that. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. He also says, which he has a syndicated radio show worldwide and crazy rich guy that's, he also says you shouldn't buy without 20% down and a 15-year term. And I don't agree with those. I think people build wealth faster, buying it as fast as they can and having the house for longer instead of saving up the money, that total down payment and things like that. But if you do what Dave Ramsey says, you're going to be in very good financial position. So, I'm not knocking the guy. I'm just kind of realistically, the way people, the way the world kind of works is not all of them are Dave Ramsey listeners or whatever,
No, and I used to work with those guys. Specifically, I was with a company that really, it was with DeSelms, and back when I was there, that's where everybody that was a Ramsey fan, that's where they went. I mean,
Mm.
they branched out later, but a big part of our business model was servicing Ramsey people, and um, it's a different animal. I mean, we handled things a little bit different, because we just did. Can't be specific because there's nothing surprising about somebody who comes to buy a house and they've got 50% down. It gives them a lot of options.
Yes,
That kind of
yes.
stuff. A lot of options. But they did it with Ramsey. I'm not here promoting Dave Ramsey, but I'll tell you that seems like a good guy to me. I've met him personally, and so what's that got to do with anything? I'm telling you, disengaged. That's fine. I'm sliding on the ice right about now. Other factors that's going to help buyers know if they're ready to get a home. Now, this I really don't know about, so I am asking you actually. Get a home include owning life or disability insurance, having an emergency fund, and then again, Dave Ramsey, separate from your down payment, and having little or no bad debt. Those two are pretty obvious. Life insurance and disability insurance, is that important? I suppose it is.
I think you need insurance to protect something. Like when I was young and I was starting out and I bought my first house, I didn't have 10 cents. So I didn't need insurance to protect anything. There wasn't anything to protect. I think as those assets get bigger and you start a family, some of those things are more important. So yes, they are important, but maybe not your first house. Now savings, I think you always need a little bit of savings in case something happens, right? Emergency fund or whatever it's called. Definitely that. But like I said, insurance is for something to protect you for something. If you're 20 years, 21, 22 years old, just out of college, whatever it is, had your first job, you have nothing to protect, right? So I would probably pass on that one.
Yeah, I thought that was a little bit of a stretch. Not that it isn't legit. I mean, it's a legit thing, but I don't think it wouldn't come across as a requirement for me. Um, there was something else here. Let me show you. Yes. Now over the years, I've been doing this 20 years. 20 years. Wow. Oh, really? You've been in the lending game, what, 30? I mean, you've been in that for a long time.
You don't look at a day over 50.
All right. And thank you, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great show. We'll see you next Tuesday. Lastly, this guy said, he emphasized, and I was going to say, I've seen this happen over the years for sure. Emphasized that buyers should ensure their price range based on reliable annual income and not committing to a payment based on one banner year. I can't tell you, because especially when you're dealing with a younger couple, they'll be wonderfully optimistic. Jobs going well, increases are going well, and they're ready to buy a house, and they maybe got a raise like 2 or 3 months ago, just
Mm-hmm.
getting started, and they're thinking, and then they'll base, well, here's what's going to happen. We can afford this much house because next year they promised me a raise of this much, and I mean, when we do that, we're going to honey bunch. We're going to be just swimming. We're going to be doing great. And that falls apart, and all of a sudden they're the ones that have to sell to get out. And I mean, just over the years I've seen, and it's tough I would never want to dash anybody's optimism, but I'm going to be as realistic as I possibly can on, is this something that you're sure you can maintain if it presses the limits of their budget? Does that make sense?
Yes, it's the mortgage world has made some recent changes actually to kind of it's probably not to combat this. It may be what they've on variable income. It's they make us count. We have to look at history. We have to look at how long they've been getting it, different things like that to make sure the income has been consistent and it's not a banner year. And that's very, especially in commission sales, I see this a lot, because you get a type A personality, which makes them good in sales, and I love it. They're ready to buy the Ferrari after the first check, right? So, they're buying the house and the Ferrari's next. So you do have to be careful, but the mortgage industry does a pretty good job of keeping that in check as far as making it consistent.
I have to ask you a question. If this, we're not diving into politics, but we're talking about circumstances. How many bonuses when you're doing loans? This is just a flat, raw loan question. When you're dealing with somebody, and we've dealt together with people over the years, for a lot of people that depend on those bonuses to finally qualify for a certain price level. I mean, I've seen that a number of times. No idea how that works. I always tell people, I'm not a lender. I don't pretend to be. And if they'll ask me a money question, I'll go, that's a Rodney question. And nobody's ever offended by that. I just don't want to be one of those guys that thinks giving financial advice is a good idea when you don't know what you're talking about. And that's just not me for that. But when we're dealing with like people with bonuses, there's limits to bonuses? I mean, how does that break down? Because there's going to be a lot of people talk about that.
Like I said, if it's consistent, like if somebody gets $100,000 bonus every January, it's just like regular income. It's just bonus income. You just have to have it for a couple of years. It has to be consistent and likely to continue. So the problem is with these bonuses that they're usually not always the same. So you go up and you go down, and depending on when you look at it, let's say if it's going up, that's a lot better problem to have than it's going down. Because once it starts going down, it's considered declining income, and you've got new rules to count with that. So you may not be able to count it, may not be able to count all of it or something. So just depend on what it is. But yes. But if it's consistent, and a lot of people's bonus, like I've seen a lot of people where they have very modest salaries and then really big bonuses.
Yeah.
And that's fine as long as it's fairly consistent, right? Yeah. So if they're getting $200,000 or $300,000 a year each year in bonus, we can count that just like regular income.
Yeah, and the thing about bonuses is if it's production based, somebody's got to make sure that they wake up hitting the ground running every day. If it's production based on one, that's for them to pull it in, and then that their market stays strong. It feels risky to me, when people are it just feels that way, because for a lot of people, I don't care what you're doing, if you live below your means, you'll be okay. You'll be okay, but for the folks that are living beyond their means, and I've seen a lot of people doing it. I mean, this is kind of a sad story. There was just a multi-millionaire guy, was in the news the other day. He owned just tons of stuff and he didn't make it. He went belly up, had $8,000 in his bank account. And, it's a kind of a darker story than I care to share, but just because somebody lives in a big house doesn't mean they got a ton of money. It could mean that they have a ton of debt. That's what I'm saying about that. So live below your means. What about this tax thing? Now, if that actually changes things, I said tax thing, tips. Do those account for wages sometimes? I imagine if you're a waiter or waitress or something along those lines.
Tips are fine. Again, you have to have reported it. You have had to pay taxes on them.
Right.
Like you can't give me a tip jar and dump it out on the desk and say, here's $500 I got. As long as you've taken it in and paid taxes on it in the past, you can definitely count it.
Years ago, you and I had a client, and that's how he made his money. And I was so impressed with this guy because when he supplied the documents to AJ back then, all the tips, it was like in a spreadsheet. he had his tips figured out, and it was a question mark going in for me because how often do people actually do that? Well, he did, and he's still a good friend. He's doing well. So this article ends this way, and it's sort of, this is a Rodneyism as far as I'm concerned. But if we have a long-term vision, we might not time the market just perfectly, but we can be pretty confident. I thought this was kind of funny, historically speaking, that over that 20, 30 years from today, this house is going to be worth way more than we're paying for it right now. Like 20 or 30 years, I'm reasonably assured that it's going to be the case, but
it would, yes. The world it has since the beginning of time. So
I think I can be pretty confident in saying it'll do that sooner than that, but I don't want to be on commit to paper, just 5 to 7 years, we'll be all right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think that the point is, and the whole part of the article, and I think it's a decent article, in the midst of all this change and everything that's going on, prices are beginning to moderate. We're seeing that. Listing prices aren't going up as fast as they were. Mortgage rates are certainly coming down. We've got the Fed that is getting ready to address the issue. Now, that when the Fed cuts rate, there's an argument. We'll do this maybe in the next week or so, but I've got a really cool article on when the Fed cuts rate, does recession follow? Because historically, over the past 40 years or so, out of 6 or 7 times of cutting rates, about 60% of the time recession follows. And that's because they're cutting rates to solve a problem. And in this case, it may not be the same. They're not trying to juice up the economy. We're just trying to slow down the inflation part of it, So it's easy to understand with all those variables that people would have a question mark. Is this a good time for me to buy? That's my whole point. And I think, do you do this rate versus that rate? Do you do comparisons for people, Rodney, when they're, if I buy a house now and I'm going to make up numbers, 6.5, and 2 months from now, if it's 6.25, will you do comparisons so they can see if there's any difference for them?
I don't do a lot of, only if somebody's like on the fence, would we do forecasting? What we do is we'd forecast what let's say, okay, if the rates went down like you're talking about, is it better to wait versus buy now? So kind of, but not just, you'd be changing the sales price and everything for a future. So yeah, we do a little bit of forecasting, but not a whole lot. Not a lot of people. I really don't have a lot of people on the fence.
Okay. So it sounds to me like when it gets to a certain number, whatever that number is, they've got in their head, they start to move forward when that happens.
Yeah. And it's a lot of the past and most recent, customers are, I don't want to say necessary, but kind of necessary purchases, not I'm just moving down the street kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Right. And we've got some people very much on this line that we're in the near future, whenever they're ready, we've got to put on a master class for investments, and they know who they are. So we'll move on with this one. The next topic I want to touch on, I just thought it was kind of interesting. Here are the 6 most unexpected housing market trends for 2025. The future is coming fast, and 2025 will be here before we know it. Before the ball drops in Times Square, some of us want to know what to expect in the years to come. People are always looking forward like that. If you're looking into real estate, it'd be smart to investigate some of the trends that are headed our way. So the first one is that they're talking about is walkable suburbs are the new hotspots. Have you ever dealt with that kind of thing before?
Like I'm thinking this is kind of like West Haven or the Grove or something like that. That's I could
Mm-hmm.
compare it to around here. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think after um, I could see that being a very viable option for people moving out of the city.
Especially when I thought of a great example. Well, one of them was there's two others that are up in the, three others. They're starting to pop into my head. Hillsborough Village is one. And if you're not familiar with this area, just remember this and Google search Hillsborough Village. It's kind of near the college. If you live close to there, there's these shops and
Mhm.
bistros, and it's just, I mean, it's cool, man. It's right next to Music Row. If you're having it, most people don't care about it that live up there in college. They don't. Most of them don't care about Music Row, which is different these days. Hillsborough Village. 12 South is another one that if you live near there, it's real walkable. Again, little shops, little bistros, kind of. They've got a tapas bar. I don't even know what I said. TAPAS, tapas, not topless. It's a like a Mexican food. I think that's what it is. Um, but that goes on, and then over in Sylvan Park is another walkable. And I will tell you that when you look on some websites, they'll talk about walkability scores. If they're high or low. Like where I live, it would be really low because you have to. It would take you forever to walk someplace. But these places, you can walk 2 blocks and you're kind of on the main drag. But the value of walkable suburbs, well, of walkable areas, I don't know if this is a suburb per se. Well, I know it's not. But the value on Franklin, for example, if you were to look at real estate prices from the sky, if you live close to downtown, and if you've ever been to Franklin downtown, it's just Mayberry. I just love it. I love it still and shout it from the rooftops. Call me crazy. But if you live within a couple of blocks, I don't care what you're living in, it costs $1 million. And the benefit is only that you get to walk to downtown and walk to the ice cream shop and go to McCreary's for fish and chips. Sounds like Europe. Tapas. Tapas. There we go. That's what I don't know what they are. Never had one. But the walkable is a big deal. People love that. How do you feel about this multi-generational living going mainstream?
I haven't seen a lot of it.
Uh,
I, I'm still in the opinion that it's difficult for families to live together, but as with the way expenses are going, and other nationalities or other
Cultures?
yeah, they do that a lot. It's I have it's just been not been my thing. Is like I want to live by myself. You know. Yeah, when you're raising a family, I got 2 kids, um, dog and a cat. Uh, It, like I said, it's I haven't seen a lot, but I understand why it's happening.
Yeah. Well, now we've got those housing hacks that are going on, and I don't know long term if that's going to work. Where it used to be, and it's still, I think it is. I mean, I think we talked about this a couple months ago. Would you ever advise friends to buy a house together? Would that be, what side would you fall on that kind of advice?
I'd I advise against it. I mean, I advise against it.
But they're talking about, a few weeks ago, they were talking about that as being a housing hack, but it's actually a solution to affordability for a lot of folks.
Yeah,
That's all it is. But if you
yeah.
have a blowout and there's no
You
commitment,
just got to realize that you're going to execute your exit strategy, right? You're going to have your exit plan up front, and there's going to be some kind of usually there's going to be some kind of you stayed up too late and used my pan or something. Who knows?
That's my favorite pan, you
Yeah,
bastard.
you drank my last Mountain Dew.
Bleep. Sorry. All right. So I would agree with that. And I've heard people talk about it, and I understand their heart's in the right place. They're trying to find a solution to not having to pay exorbitant rent. And it sounds like a really good idea. The second thing that I'll hear from people like that, and it's just so common, I think as it should be. Do you know where there's any duplexes or triplexes for sale? What I want to do is buy it and rent out the other 2 units. It's completely reasonable if they can swing it,
Mhm.
They're just looking for solutions. That's all. So hybrid home takes center stage is going to be another trend. But anyway, the reason for this article, whether we like it or not, multi-generational living goes mainstream is going to be a thing. So they're saying. I wonder if that includes the kid coming back home at 38. Is that multi-generational?
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yeah,
So we,
I think the article points out there's a lot of how we've seen these mother-in-law suites or the
yeah,
accessory dwelling units. Uh, we've seen a lot of that. So I'm assuming so you can have a little bit of space, but you know,
yeah, it might be a good idea to have a place put together so you can have 2 families live there separately in the same house. You can do that. I'll bet there's people that can talk about that. Hybrid home takes center stage with remote work here to stay. Homes in 2025 will need to do a lot more heavy lifting. We're seeing the hybrid home trend emerge. Buyers aren't just looking for a house, they want a space that can serve multiple purposes: home, office, gym, school, homeschoolers, I suppose, an entertainment area. Man, oh man, if remote work didn't bring that to full bloom, right? People were living in studio and then getting COVID, and they were like driving themselves crazy and scooted out to the suburbs. So there you go. Here's one I know you would love, Rodney. Tiny homes make a big splash. In a surprising twist, tiny homes are set to become a big deal in 2025. This one may seem surprising, but tiny homes are gaining traction in unexpected places. The affordability crisis is pushing people to rethink what they really need in a home. Whether you're a retiree looking to downsize or first-time buyer trying to get a foot on the property ladder, 2025 might be the year you think small to win big. Any thoughts on tiny homes?
yeah, I'm gonna bet that doesn't take off like they think. I think it's already had its splash, and
Really?
it's a novel thing. It's novel, but I don't see a lot of people living in these things. They're vacation homes, little rental things, fun things to do, but this ain't your mainstream home.
We're going to back up just 2 seconds. This is funny. My son is never leaving home. A resigned mom. I think in Franklin, I have to look this up. I'm not making this up. I think it's actual. Is that there's a tiny home thing going on here in Franklin, I think. And I have to look that up. But I read about that. It would have been several months ago. Didn't catch much of my attention, as you can tell. But I think, again, it's always based on the same thing. If houses were affordable, tiny wouldn't be so appealing. And when the rules change, when rates go down, which it seems like they're going to, and I mean, home prices, I don't know that they're yeah, I don't know about it. I don't have an answer. I don't want to give an answer on that one. But when the tiny home becomes less necessary, they're going to fall out of favor, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
That's climate change reshapes buying decisions. Boy, oh boy, if you live in Florida, what are they saying? In 2025, the dream location might do more with weather patterns and ocean waves. We're all seeing climate change influencing where people are choosing to live. Areas that are more resilient to climate impacts, like the Pacific Northwest. I didn't know that. and parts of the Midwest are becoming increasingly attractive to buyers. So before you make that big move, consider not just the current climate, but what it might look like in 10 or 20 years. That's going to be a political stance, I'm quite sure.
Yeah. I thought the Midwest was Tornado Alley.
I was, when I saw that headline, and that's kind of really what all I looked at on this one was the, well, you've got, gosh, you got landslides and earthquakes, I guess is pretty common in Cali. I'd rather have one bedroom condo than a tiny home. Amen to that. Sorry, I'm not staying on top of my messages, but I agree with that. But down in Florida, that's become so tough with hurricanes doing all the damage. Insurance is going crazy, and I don't know about climate change. I'm not going to stick a position on that. But the weather's been tough down there over the past decade or two. And it's making, when you have a condo that's on the 14th floor and insurance is through the roof, that's why I understand that there's a lot of empty condos down there these days.
Yeah, I haven't seen the market and what it's doing. I know some areas are definitely trending downward, and this whole thing has been the issue over insurance. Over that insurance. I think you have to have wind insurance as well. So, I don't know if it falls under the climate change category, but definitely it's climate related. The excess out of Florida and other areas, but it's got a sun and a beach. I'm thinking they're going to be okay somehow, some way. They're going to make it.
It's like, and I say this with love. And I mean that there are a lot of people that are. I think California is number one in exodus. It's the number one state for people leaving that state, but there's still it's the heaviest population. I'm pretty sure in the country is in California out there, and despite all the expenses and the all the stuff, it's so beautiful out there. People are like, yeah, it's expensive, but I love it here.
72 and sunny every day.
Every day, they just have a weather report on the loop, right? Beautiful place. I'd love to live there if it was different. So the last thing that they've brought up is the first time buyers stage a comeback. How do you feel about that?
I like it. I think it's I think with affordability coming around, I think we're going to have less of the COVID move. And I think first-time home buyers are going to be able to get back in at a faster pace.
I agree. I think a lot of decisions going to be. To think of what we have been through as a country and as an industry since 2019 or 2020, I guess, is when COVID really landed. I think that's right. The changes that have taken place from then until now have been monumental. And what I see coming up is a period of, I'm going to call it calm, unless, yes, there's a couple of wars going on. There's stuff still happening. There's turmoil going on. But as an industry and as an economy, it seems to me that we're heading into a little more of a quiet time. If we actually get that soft landing, or people are saying that I think that you believe that there's a good chance we're in a recession currently, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But maybe these lower rates will help lift us out of that a little bit reasonably, in a reasonable way. It seems to me that the next couple of years are going to be relatively quiet compared to what we've seen. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think they'll be better. Quiet's
relatively, though, I said.
Yeah, I think it's going to be better. I think it's going to slowly gain traction and nothing too crazy.
Yeah, and the two things that I've never heard this anywhere else that I don't know. I don't listen for it, but the two things that I'm looking for in the future is stability and duration, and I guess the one is related to the other by definition. But if rates continue to drop reasonably and they do it over a long period of time where people feel safe, then we're going to start making progress, I think is the way that works. I don't know. This seems like the longest pre-land. I have to agree. I mean, what's coming up on 3 or 4 years, right? Hadn't
I
that,
think,
didn't,
yeah, I think we've already landed.
I think that you're probably right. So, we got Ronnie. You and I got a choice. We're almost home. The top 10 trends in 24 that finish at the year, or we can jump to the NAR appeal to the circuit court, to the Supreme Court. Which do you want to go?
Yeah, let's do the NAR one.
Okay. In this
Since
particular,
it came out 2 weeks ago.
yes, it's fresh. So NAR, National Association of Realtors, appeals to the circuit court decision taking the Department of Justice fight to the Supreme Court. And I thought this is kind of interesting because this is so much has changed and yet nothing has changed. And I have been able to prove that in the last few days. That it seems like the entire real estate industry has been set on its ear, and yet it's just a basic set of instructions that have changed, not the actual industry. Expectations are different. When we make offers, we don't have that certainty like we used to have. There's a little more up in the air. And this has all come about from the NAR settlement that changed the rules where you can't show compensation on the MLS, and buyers and agents, if they choose to have an agent, they have to have a buyer agency agreement before they tour homes, so that out in the open, in a fully transparent way, commissions are known and understood. That's basically what it is, transparency. So the National Association of Realtors, NAR from now on, announced on Thursday, it's last Thursday, its decision to appeal to the Supreme Court following a ruling by the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals that allows the Department of Justice to reopen its investigation into the trade group. This decision comes after the appeals court denied NAR's request for a rehearing in July. It basically means back in 2020, the two parties had originally reached a settlement, meaning the Department of Justice and National Association of Realtors reached a settlement in 2020 which aimed to conclude the DOJ's investigation into NAR's policies on property listing and agent compensation. Under the terms of that agreement, NAR was required to enhance transparency around broker commissions and cease any misrepresentation that buyer broker services were free. We've never said that. And I'm going to say this in a full-throated way. The only people who say that are typically new to the industry, and they'll say that without checking on with anybody on I want to say the legality. I suppose that's as close to right as I can get. But that's where that comes from. It's a mistake that people would say that, even though it feels like it. Because all the money in any transaction, when it comes to the sale of a home, comes from the bucket that the buyer possesses. All of the money starts there and then flows from there through the seller's hands. So it's not free. Was I accurate in that, Rodney?
Yeah, like the agents the agent's money may come from the sellers, but it wouldn't come. That part wouldn't come from the buyers. But it's all going to be disclosed on your settlement statement or your closing disclosure.
Right. It's just they're trying to get away from that. This is free, and it's not. It's not
Correct.
being paid directly
Somebody
from.
else's
Correct. But that's the rule change, because now it can come from the buyer directly, which has always been an option. Always been an option. That's part of the problem. Mm-hmm. With that option wasn't clear enough to the Department of Justice. So in return for NAR's compliance, the DOJ agreed to close its investigation. And if you get down to I'm going to jump to the bottom of this because I don't know that the details are necessarily interesting. NAR's latest court filing indicates that the trade group plans to submit a writ of certiorari, best I can do. That means to get a judgment to the Supreme Court by October 10th. The filing also notes that the Department of Justice has agreed to significantly narrow the scope of documents it seeks in a civil investigative demand. Additionally, and I'm done with this stuff. Additionally, NAR has committed to producing documents related to the Sitzer-Burnett Commission lawsuits, which I've got an interesting story on that, by September 30th. Documents pertaining to NAR's clear cooperation policy, which includes the controversial participation rule, which is gone at the center of the commission lawsuits, are expected to be provided by November 12th. That's when they're going to finalize this thing, hopefully, or a month after the potential Supreme Court ruling. Furthermore, and I'll finish this way, and then we can go on. In recent filings, and this is, I think, where you were talking about, or maybe it was Philip, I can't remember. Furthermore, in recent filings related to the Novoselic case, where the DOJ became involved in late September 2023, the department has made its stance clear. The DOJ has made its stance clear. It opposes cooperative compensation and has expressed a desire to eliminate offers of buyer-broker compensation entirely. That seems to be their goal.
That's a serious statement right there. I didn't know that their stance was to eliminate the thing entirely. I thought, because the rule is it just needs to be negotiated, and the buyer needs to understand needs to understand who's paying it and all that stuff. But yeah, if their DOJ's coming out and saying they're wanting to get rid of it entirely, that's a whole different change to our industry.
Yeah, can we get off? I don't know what that means exactly. I'm sure you can.
Sure you can, Philip. We don't say no on this podcast.
That's our 10 o'clock p.m. show. I'm hoping that based on that last sentence there, and remember, and that's from Housing Wire, and I'm going to tell you, in my humble opinion, Housing Wire does a pretty good job of, they do a good job of covering this stuff. They seem pretty responsible. But by eliminating the offers of buyer brokers compensation entirely, I'm hoping that that's what that concession idea satisfies, because it went from where compensation was offered, it is no longer offered, where now it says seller concessions offered, and concessions is a bucket of money. For anybody that doesn't know, a concession that is offered by a seller on a listing in an MLS is merely an enticement to a buyer that the seller will participate in some of the buyer's costs. But the concession is a bucket of money that does not specifically address it to anything. It's up to the buyer to decide where that money goes. If some of it goes to closing costs, great. Some of it goes to agent commission, that's great, but it's not specific. It's an enticement. But here's the catch, and I don't know if it's a catch, but this is what's throwing everybody off. And I'm going to make a comparison. I think this is fair. If I'm getting off track or too detailed, give me this. The way it used to be, which is no longer, the compensation was spelled out XYZ on the listing. And you could expect that to be the case once the contract was worked out. You could expect that to be an accurate and expected number. With concessions, it's not binding and it's not guaranteed. It's an enticement. And so when you write a contract with seller concessions, it isn't unless those numbers are put in the stipulations or someplace on the contract, stipulations spelled out, they do not exist. So a concession cannot be seen as a guarantee. And that's going to throw people off, meaning buyers, because they're going to see that concession of $10,000. They offer what I would call a low ball or a less amount on the house. Well, the seller is going to see a place to compensate for that is the agent commit or the concessions. And so that's why that's where the rules have changed, and that's where people are getting confused. That was way too technical. Sorry about that.
No, it was a good explanation of it.
Yeah.
Now I will say this: whenever we're writing words, just don't ever write the word concession. Concession's a bad word in the loan business.
Say that again. I was reading.
Sales concession is a bad word in the loan business.
Well, why?
Like a true sales concession is like something a seller's giving that another, say a TV, for instance. They say it's a sales concession, and what you'd have to do is take the value of the TV off the sales price, and that mean the buyer would have to bring that money in on its own. But in what you're describing, it's basically a pool of money, sales concession, pool of money that can be used for however the buyer desires, however it's negotiated in the contract. So,
yeah, and they've changed the rules on, or have they changed the rules on third-party interested parties?
No, it's still the same. It's still the same percentages and things like that. The VA's clarified that the buyer can pay their,
they have.
They have. So outside of that, no other concessions has changed.
Interesting.
Seller contributions.
Yeah. It's man, and it's going to keep rolling. I was in the office today telling stories back and forth with a bunch of brokers, and it's all over the map. What's transpired in 17, 12, 13 days, I mean, this is when we get a good sampling of the responses of the market. This is when we're finding out what happens, when the rubber meets the road. So what a fun day. You got any final thoughts there, Rodney? Have we missed any questions that we didn't need to? Can we check this?
Yeah. No, appreciate everybody tuning in.
It was a fun day. Rodney, thank you. No additional thoughts. Ange, good to see you. Philip, Wendy, you guys have a good day. Well, love you, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.